handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2 1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4 7 tree 9er 8 9er out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds HEPT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Denise Simon Experience. Very happy to have you with us. I've got the distinct honor of having George Gilder with us. Now, George is the author of, I think, 18 books, if I read that correctly. He's the founder of...
20. I think Life After Google is my 20th book.
Yay! And he is the founder of the Discovery Institute. Want to learn a little bit more about that. But his most recent book is Life After Google, The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy. So with that, welcome, George. I'm very happy to have you with us.
Oh, great to be here.
I'm fascinated by this topic, and I give you a big handshake for even having the notion to write about Google and where we go from here in big data. Who needs to read this book, George?
Well, anybody who wants to invest in the new economy. I mean, the old economy is dying, and we've had no IPOs to speak of in technology for several years. The number of public companies on our stock market has collapsed 50%. The number of shares have collapsed 50%. Big companies are buying up their competitors and buying up their own shares. The number of startups has declined. We need a new economy, and it's being provided by the crypto revolution, which has established the ICO as an alternative to the IPO, really, and has found a new path for funding enterprise around the world. And it's going to transform the internet architecture, so it's no longer a porous, insecure a channel where all the money and power rises to the top.
Well, a lot of people, George, know about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is hardly the only cryptocurrency out there, correct?
Yeah, Bitcoin was launched the movement and really conceived the blockchain, which is at the heart of the movement. But since then, there's been an efflorescence of creativity. Thousands of companies have emerged to apply this technology across the board, and it's just as exciting as the earlier .com efflorescence, and it's as perilous as that one is. 46% of all crypto companies have already pretty much failed. So you got to tread carefully. But I hope that my book, Life After Google, really gives you a deeper sense of how this is a fundamental change in the security architecture of the entire internet and the entire digital economy.
Now, George, you mentioned blockchain, which is essentially a ledger sheet that says who owns what when it comes to cryptocurrency.
Well, it's who owns what, but it also can be a vehicle to collect any kind of facts or truths or titles or anything that you don't want to change, anything that's rooted in your own identity, which doesn't change, should be incorporated in blockchains. And they're a new distributed way of having security on the internet. The centralization turns out not to be safe, and all our passwords and pins and the security questions and expiration dates and whatever are all out there. They've been lost, and we need to establish the internet economy on a new foundation of real security, and the blockchain offers a path to that. The blockchain and many affiliate technologies that are being developed to support it.
George, who is in control of the blockchain?
Nobody.
So if you've got nobody,
anybody can download it and elaborate on it with new software for new applications. It's distributed, and in order to change anything on a blockchain, you got to control more than 51% of all the nodes on the network, and the effort to control 50% would increase the prices of most of these assets so much that it renders these blockchain technologies essentially impregnable. This doesn't mean that the exchanges and all the systems surrounding the blockchain are impregnable, as they've been hacked a lot. But there's a lot of activity to establish interfaces to blockchains and other cryptographic systems that are as stable as the blockchain itself.
George, how long will it take for blockchain to become part of everyday life for the common person?
Well, it's a constant process. I mean, it is what the leading edge technologists across the financial community and increasingly across other industries are doing. It's the new path to a secure way of recording information, data, titles, knowledge, credentials, and money.
Is this almost an alternative layer to what we know today as the internet?
Yeah, it's. I used to call it layer 8. In my book Scandal of Money, which preceded Life After Google, I called for a layer 8 of the internet that would focus on trust and transactions, and that's really what is now emerging, a new layer of functionality for the internet. The internet was created just for emails and hypertext and bulletin boards, but not for serious transactions. And for transactions, you got to go outside the internet. And when you go outside the internet, you transmit data. Personal data flows all across the porous channels of the network and gets captured. And this new technology remedies this great vulnerability. It is like a layer 8 for trust and transactions for the internet. The layer structure, it's called a stack, the internet stack. And it's been 7 layers, and it needs a layer 8 for transactions.
What What do you mean by life after Google?
I wrote a book called Life After Television that Steve Jobs distributed to a lot of his cohorts, and in which predicted that the computer of the future would be as portable as your watch, as personal as your wallet. It would recognize speech. It would navigate streets. It would collect your news and your mail. It just might not do Windows, but it would open doors. And I wrote that in 1990 or so, and I think it came true. But a part of this prophecy was that we'd no longer have to see a lot of ads we didn't want to see. And Google really did solve that problem to some degree. Google has relatively discrete ads that are relatively well targeted for your own interests. So Google ads are less offensive than most ads across the internet. But the whole Google scheme of giving everything away for free in exchange for data, which is used to target commerce toward you, is coming to an end with the new internet structure of what I call the cryptocosm, the new structure of the internet where individuals and producers of content retain control of it. And the big internet leviathans have to come to you rather than you go to them to find out your username and password.
George, with Google and some of the other tech companies, are they kind of affecting future behavior? Are they nudging it in a certain direction for any users at this point?
I'm sorry. What was that again?
Tech companies like Google or other tech companies, are they modeling our behavior because of where we're going with this, and are they nudging our behavior?
Well, they're nudging our behavior. But this idea that they're, yes, they collect tremendous amounts of data, and they use that data to target products, their goods and services to you. I don't think this is the great threat to privacy that many people imagine. It's, it's, you have to choose. Do you want to actually get ads and products that you actually want, which entails allowing the suppliers to have some information about you, or do you want to be battered all the time with general broadcast advertisements that have nothing to do with your interests or actual goals? And I think that potentially the system of collecting data is good, but they should pay you for it. It's your data.
Yes.
And you should retain your personal information because they've demonstrated that they can't protect it. So I think that new technologies like the Brave browser, which Brendan Eich launched. He was the creator of JavaScript, which is the most popular software language there is. And he founded Mozilla and Firefox and was one of the key figures at Netscape. He's a giant in the history of the internet. And he's launched a new browser called the Brave browser, which helps you retain control of your own content, and it establishes control by individuals of their own data.
Well, we have an awful lot of people out here that feel like that their information, all of their activity on the internet has been, I don't want to say compromised, but that could be a word too, but it is out there in the hands of unknown quantities. And so there's a fear factor. Is that a justified fear, George?
Well, I was brought up in a small town, and in a small town, everybody is talking about everybody else. When I was a kid, all phone calls were on a party line, and the operator sat and listened in, and was a fount of news for everybody else. Rumors were pervasive. I think the big hope of these new technologies is they allow you to recapture control of your own information and your transactional records, and allow you to document truly your actual behavior. The real issue isn't being anonymous. The real issue is having government or other powerful parties intrude and make false charges against you, or misrepresent your transactions, or fraudulently extort from you. And the whole purpose of the cryptographic revolution is to reestablish a foundation of trust and factuality on the net. So when the government comes and claims that you've evading taxes, you can demonstrate all your transactions unimpeachably. But until that happens, you don't have to divulge your mother's maiden name to every transitory person you want to deal with across the internet.
Indeed so. Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with George Gilder, who is the author of Life After Google, The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy. George, where does artificial intelligence fall into all of what is about to be our future?
Artificial intelligence is a terrific technology. It's the next step in computation, and it has nothing to do with human brains. It will not destroy jobs any more than any technology destroys jobs, and it's overwhelmingly evident through history that as technologies advance, they create better and safer and more creative work for human beings. The big delusion about AI is that it somehow is creating a brain that's better than the human brain, and that all of us will be reduced to kind of serfs and an economy of robots. And that is a really delusional idea of the Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is adopted what I call a new Marxism. Marx's real view was that the Industrial Revolution was the final revolution and that it solved the human productivity problem forever, so we wouldn't have to work anymore. And I think that AI is a new technology, but it does not destroy jobs, net jobs. It creates more jobs than it destroys.
Well, there's still a human element because, the humans still have to read the estimates and the output of artificial intelligence.
Input and output. Humans create and program every AI product. It's just it's a tool of human intellect, not a replacement for it.
So what your book, Life After Google, is really doing then is kind of setting the stage for the reader to get, used to where we're going, correct?
Yeah, it explains how what seems like a permanent new establishment of the 1%, dominated by FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, whatever, that this establishment too will pass, just as digital equipment and IBM and HP were once imperial forces in computation. These new forces also will give way to a new internet economy with many features that remedy the security flaws and the hustles and distractions of the current internet.
Yeah, and I would say that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that there are some rogue nations, otherwise being China at the top of that list, that are going to work to compromise that advancement by the United States. Would that be right?
Yes, but what else is new? I mean, the world has always been full of spies and sabotage and hackers of various descriptions, and many of them are associated with governments. And that's just the way the world is. China, however, is a crucial complement to the U.S. economy. They produce many of our tech goods, and it's really a wonderful development that China, that once was just completely out of the world economy, it was a communist wasteland, really, with military forces, is now a great capitalist power. And they actually have smaller government than we do. I'm not there's 17, government is 17% of their GDP compared to our government about 30% of GDP. Now, I don't like the communist regime in China, but the capitalist economy of China is an amazing resource for the world economy, and we shouldn't panic over its advances.
Well, I mean, competition certainly makes you better at your own work. So
that's true.
But this
is collaborative competition. I mean, the iPhone, which is sort of an exemplary product of a leading American company in the world, which is Apple today, right, by market cap. And the iPhone is largely manufactured in China. Now that all the profits go to Apple, but almost all the profits. But China gets a lot of employment and a lot of training and a lot of learning out of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the book is Life After Google. Author we've been speaking with is George Gilder. You can find his book on Amazon. And with that, I want to thank you, George, for being with us and explaining your good work, and best wishes on the success of the book. And come back again soon.
Thank you so much, Denise.
All right.
Appreciate it.
More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
You are about to join Don Newen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an intel analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Newen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Newen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Newen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Check the Talk America Radio schedules for showtimes at talkamericaradio.us.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. For 28 years, I was in the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. No more. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. Radio networks like Talk America Radio will not fail you. Radio shows like Cowboy Logic Radio will not fail you. Check out the entire roster of over 60 weekly radio shows by visiting talkamericaradio.us. That's talkamericaradio.us.
TalkAmericaRadio.us.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Denise Simon Experience. Very happy that you could be with us for the wild ride. Got the distinct pleasure of having Tom Del Beccaro with us, Esquire, stellar one at that, author of The Divided Era, contributor over at Forbes magazine, and as I said, lawyer, and he is the purveyor, the owner of politicalvanguard.com, and a former California Senate, U.S. Senate candidate that was competing against Kamala Harris, who will, by the way, will be part of this topic. So with that, Tom Del Beccaro, welcome to the Denise Simon Experience.
Great to be on again. How are you doing?
You're sweet. Thanks. Okay, here's where we are. We have this cockamamie movement that's happening here, and cockamamie is going to be the understatement of the year because we have some candidates, least of which was happening in New York, where we have the Democrat Socialists of America, DSA, that seems to have some traction here in the United States. And we saw that with Crowley getting unseated in his primary. And then we have, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world. We've got, countless ones on the House side. And so in the title of your book, Divided Era, does this add kind of another dimension for what is really happening here with the Democrat Party? I mean, are they having their own dividedness going on here, Tom?
Well, I think what you see, and I talk about this in the book, The Divided Era, which people can get at Amazon, the larger the stakes in any one political dynamic, whether that's the Revolution, the Civil War, the Gilded Age, all of which I covered in the book, or now, which is based on, much of our division is based on the enormous spoils system that is developed and the party's drive to control it and hand it out. What you find is as the stakes rise, the middle disappears. At the beginning of a dynamic, you might have some people, which I call in the book the olive branch dynamic, which are people who try and bridge the middle. But as the dynamic becomes persistent and grows, the middle disappears. Those who want to either claim fame or otherwise are shunned, and the more fringe, those to the more outer, not fringe sometimes is a negative word, but those that are more partisan than the others begin to come to the fore, and you hear more of those voices. This is a consistent dynamic. The olive branch petition, of course, was after the revolution started. There were those, including Ben Franklin, who tried to convince the King of England that not to go down too far down a path. And, of course, that didn't work out. During the run-up to the Civil War, there were those who didn't want it to spin out of control. And in the South, there was something called fire breathers who were intent on fanning the flames of secession. And so this, of course, today is a much lesser degree. It is occurring today. But it's not a surprise that the left 20% of the Democrat Party has the greater voice. I mean, Nancy Pelosi does not straight up represent much of the whole of the Democrats across this country. She's clearly on the left. And so is the whole party going to turn into Democrat socialists? Maybe, maybe not. They were, you look at Bill Clinton, there was an interlude there where they did things like welfare reform and others, and you could make the argument it was more centrist. But what you're finding now is that as the middle is disappearing because the stakes of controlling government are so high, you're getting more of these outlier voices.
And so I would say with some of this, some operatives within the Democrat Party and the Democrat Socialist wing of the Democrat Party are actually manufacturing, and I will include Hillary Clinton in this too, they're manufacturing a crisis where there doesn't need to be one. We keep talking about things like LGBT rights or religious rights and marital rights and all these other kinds of things. It's really a manufactured crisis, but they've packaged it such that it is a party platform which has a lot of legs within the socialist wing of the party, correct?
Well, certainly the size that government is today is, the entire communist platform, or almost the entire communist platform of 1911, which includes something like Social Security and health care and things like that, exists today. And so, we've socialized education, have we not? You have a national system. We have socialized health care to a great degree. So there's strong elements of that in our own government. And what we have found with the advent of media, and by that I don't just mean television, I mean the internet and everything. In the mass media age, and because it's so pervasive, you have to shout louder to get attention. And the Democrats have been very, very good about what you describe as manufacturing a crisis. Just take recently the discovery of children at the border. Of course, in 2014, Nancy Pelosi said we shouldn't politicize children at the border because that was their guy. Now that Trump's in, it's a national travesty. So yes, they are now manufacturing the crisis, and as Rahm Emanuel said, not letting them go to waste.
And even when you bring up those facts to these Democrat operatives and you show it that what is happening today isn't any different than what happened during the 8 years of the Obama administration, they talk right past that fact and essentially say you should have learned that it was bad then, so why continue it now?
Yeah, hypocrisy is out of control. I mean, just look at the Strzok hearings when Congressman Dormer brought up the fact that during this process, Strzok was cheating on his wife and lying to her. And he was trying to say that brings into doubt your credibility. And the Democrats went crazy.
I went nuts.
Those same Democrats think that Trump did something with Stormy Daniels 14 years ago, and and that's disqualifying. But Peter Schrock, in the middle of an investigation doing it, is not. So either they both are or they both aren't. But the Democrats try to have it both ways. And the media was happy to help them. The major media was happy to help them.
Yeah, indeed they were. So, Tom, today we have this movement. We have the movement that is happening on college campuses. We have the movements that is happening in cities and towns across the country. Certainly every single day in Washington, D.C., there's some kind of a demonstration, whether it's televised or not. I mean, there are these roving teams that are not just happening on the Hill, but I mean, you can go 2 blocks, 3 blocks away, and they literally rove up and down sidewalks and kind of get in your face. And then we have London with this colossal movement, this colossal demonstration / rally that was going on that included the Stop the War Coalition, which is counterpart here in the United States is Answer. And then you have the Socialist Workers Party, which is really a communist party, which isn't any different than what is happening here in the United States with the Democrat Socialists of America. So where are the Republicans? I would say is this go into some kind of First Amendment protection, or that they don't want to touch it, or where's the TV ads going? This is what the Democrats are about, and where are you, America, and where are the Republicans?
Well, the Republicans have never specialized in media or being as good at getting their message out as the Democrats. They just haven't. It's much easier to cry fire than it is to settle a crowd down. And the Republicans have a hard time settling down political crowds. And so they do need to do a better job of this. They should run ads that show some of these things. They certainly, going into this fall, need to be able to say to voters, we promised this with the tax reform. The Democrats said it would be the end of the world, and this is how it works. And now they want to be back in charge. On the other hand, right now, there's a certain reality that the Democrats have gone so far on issues like ICE that they're shooting themselves in the foot. And there's an old adage that when your opponent's shooting themselves, you shouldn't get in the way of the bullet. And I think that's where they are at this moment. But they need to do, as your question implies, they need to do a much better job of reaching voters, saying, here's what we're doing, here's the alternative, you don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bill that was introduced in the House that, to abolish ICE. And so Paul Ryan called them on it and said, okay, we'll vote on it next week. And then they go, that's a political ploy. We're not going to vote. We're going to vote no.
Yeah, they did call their bluff on that, and it was a good thing. Look, clearly the Democrats want the issues. They don't want resolution. I mean, Chuck Schumer all but said he's not going to work with Trump on immigration because he wants the issue. And that's where they are. I mean, what issue, if you think about it, the interesting thing about all these protests is they're happening in an age of relative prosperity. If it wasn't for the mass media, these things would never catch fire because the vast majority of Americans really right now aren't that discontent. It's just the ability of media, and again, by that I don't mean just television, I mean every element from your phone to the major networks, sensationalizes, because you've got to scream louder than the person next to you and say things are at the end of the world to get attention. Now, the problem with that for the Democrats is, in fact, there's a lot of people don't think things are very bad right now. So when you're crying wolf, you take a political risk, and the Democrats every week seem to cry wolf at some, and by that I mean the Democrat leadership, at some enormous level that is, they're losing credibility. And one other thing about the Democrats that is interesting right now, the total age of the 3 leadership people in the Democrat Party is 234. They are too old in leadership to effectively bring people to their party. So the Republicans actually have a more dynamic leadership structure, and the old structure is keeping the Democrats are at a disadvantage in some respects.
Well, I would say, given the current economic prosperity and the unemployment rate and the GDP, gross domestic product growth that we're having, and with the tax relief and so forth and so on, the working class, if you will, those that, the small business and even corporations are very busy expanding their businesses, and they're dusting off their expansion plans and putting a lot of those in place. So they're very busy doing the things that they should be doing in the free enterprise system. So they don't really have time to be running checks and balances every 5 minutes on the Kamala Harrises and the Maxine Waters here at this point. Would you agree, or did I state that wrong?
Well, it might be overstated to a certain degree. I mean, remember that Republicans generally don't work in government, or certainly Democrats do at a greater percentage, and independents don't either. And it's the independents that matter. The important economic statistic right now is the fact that there are more jobs openings than there are people to fill them, which means, and that people are coming back into the workforce. So that means, yes, you're right. There's a huge number of Americans that want to take advantage of this moment and start making money again or get better wages. And so you're right. For them, all this noise, they may be missing some of it, but also when they hear it, they know, well, things aren't as bad as they're saying. Or why would I want to go back to them when the only thing they're offering is to abolish ICE? They're not making sense. The biggest mistake the Democrats are making right now is they are not promoting any issue that resonates with independents, not one. And what they should be doing is talking about how the Republicans failed to fix health care. And the Republicans didn't fix it. They didn't set up a new set of laws that allowed the market to flourish so that people could get better insurance. That's what they should be talking about. They should not be fanning the flames of immigration. The recent polling on immigration showed that it became the number one issue, but not because Democrats became interested in it or more interested, but that Republicans became more interested in it. And that what that tells you is they've motivated Republican voters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tom, if you were going to be a witness in a congressional committee on the, I guess, the current model of the Democrat Party and begin to describe its flaws, and let's say, for instance, you're going to do this before the Department of Homeland Security Committee in the House, what would be your presentation?
Well, isn't that an interesting question? I rather like the flaws of the Democrat Party. And I'm loath to point out, like I just did, the fact that they should be concentrating on healthcare if they want to resonate. Uh-huh. I think here in California, I don't know if you remember, if you're aware of this, there was a restriction on office holding and the like being communist, and they removed it.
Yes.
So that's where America's going. I mean, look, and this is what history is about, of course, right? Governments start out small, fairly local, and they just grow and grow and grow. And there's an interesting comment about Alexis de Tocqueville, where he compared the French under Louis XIV to the English. And, of course, Louis XIV was the absolute monarch, judge, jury, prosecutor, and the like. And he said there is enormous power in that. But he said the English government was more powerful because of its size, because because of its developed bureaucracy, right? And so that's what happens over time. That the bureaucracy of government, the magnitude of it continues to grow and grow and grow, and then you have a dynamic, which is what we have today. If you're Steve Bannon, you call it the deep state. If you you just call it the growth in government, because this has always happened. And at the end of the day, that government wants to perpetuate itself, not the politician who wants to get reelected, but the bureaucracy wants to grow itself and wants to insulate itself from criticism. I mean, how literally absurd for Peter Schrock to sit there and say, what you're doing is corroding the FBI. No, you corroded the FBI, and I'm not here to promote government help. I want limited government that actually does a job, even though it's going to do it inefficiently. And so we are living in a time, which is, not unlike the end of the Republic before Imperial Rome, where the bureaucracy has gone massive, corruption is rife, and that doesn't mean Trump's corrupt, and it didn't mean George Bush was corrupt. It means that there are elements within the government that are, and this happens at every level. I'm always amazed at the Democrat who decries corruption in the local school board or in the local city council, but can't understand how it would occur in the Defense Department or feigns outrage about it. But this is where we are, and the Democrat Party promotes larger government than the Republican Party, but then again, not that much larger, right? Mm-hmm. And so, again, the Communist Party's platform is virtually enacted. We are in the age of massive government, and there's no example of the shrinking of government voluntarily, of a large government. That's not what happened.
And I would say that the successes of the socialist, communist, and even Democrat big government takeover kind of thing, they say it can't happen here in the United States. But if you look at Venezuela, what is happening in Venezuela, and I would argue even today as we speak in Nicaragua, that same model is going on with the number of homeless and starving and stupidness that's going on in San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, to the point where now you've got city legislatures that are authorizing checks to hand to these people and say, here's some money and here's a plane ticket, fly someplace else, we want you out of here.
Yeah, well,
so it's happened here, right?
Well, look, we have a $4 trillion federal government with $20 trillion in debt. We have an enormous ability to carry on more than Venezuela. Mm-hmm. But no one can say, when government is 37% of the GDP, no one can say that we haven't, that it's not the America that was founded. We have socialized many things, healthcare and education, which, by the way, any activist will tell you those are the two things you go after to begin with to reach the stage of socialism. And look, the Roman Republic became out of control. Assassinations of the Gracchi, total corruption, and turned to dictatorship. Plato at 2500 BC talked about the cycle where you go from that each government dies of an excess of its basic principle, right? In democracy, you give so much away that it leads to chaos, and of course that's what happened. I talk about this in the book, The Divided Era. That's what happened to the Greeks in the 3rd and 4th century BC, and so we're headed in that direction. Will it look the same? When will it occur? I don't know. But if you're sitting on $20 trillion in debt, California's sitting on nearly 1.4 to $2 trillion in debt. How's that going to get paid back? Something difficult is going to happen, and I'm not sure which. With the and class warfare is your signal now of this kind of dynamic. But what Trump has done, the only antidote to class warfare is economic growth. The only political antidotes actually make it worse because they pit one group against another. Economic growth lessens it. How long will we have this growth? We'll see.
Really quite fascinating. I mean, it's so difficult, Tom. Would you agree that keeping a bird's eye view, you're very good at this, which sets you apart from so many others, keeping a bird's eye view, because media kind of gets down into a little event over here or a little issue over there when there's a much broader scope to the things that are happening here.
There's a famous line, and I'm not sure. I do need to figure out who said it, but a famous line about how the media is interested in the minute hand of time, not the hour hand. Historians try and view the hour hand, and that's why you have to look at growth in government in the United States. If up until the pre-media age, prior to radio and TV, government was less than 10% of the economy. In half that time that the other existed, government has now grown to 37% because of the power of word and pictures to move people to government action.
Well said. I like that a lot. Tom, you've done a great service here in your presentation on the Denise Simon Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom is the author of The Divided Era, which you can get on Amazon.com. And if for nothing else, you can trot on over to politicalvanguard.com, keeping huge tabs on what is happening in a broader scope. I am going to challenge you to challenge Kamala Harris to another debate. She'll clearly decline, but it would be a lot of fun here at this point, since she seems to be the point person for 2020 in a potential run to the White House, which I would say would be setting those like Elizabeth Warren to cast aside. I think Kamala is probably the one that is being mentored and groomed here at this point. Agreed?
I do agree. Although she is kind of a lightweight. She doesn't have a depth of issues. But that's not important. In Plato decried the possibilities of democracy because he said they would descend into beauty contests. Often they do.
Often they do. Hat tip and handshake to you, Tom Del Beccaro. Thanks so much for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. Come back again soon.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
You can't handle the truth. The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to talk about immigration. Woohoo! It's just a topic that never seems to go away. I've got the distinct pleasure of having John Smirak with us, and he has actually authored a book, very happy that he did, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Immigration. And so congratulations, John, on writing the book, and thank you for writing the book. You make some interesting points in the book, and one that struck me in a big, huge way, and I want to make sure that I get it right, and if I don't, please correct me. There's a point in there about competition from immigration costs the American worker $450 billion a year. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and that's simply supply and demand. Think of it this way. If your daughter is selling lemonade on the front lawn and she's selling it for 50 cents a glass because that's how she can make a profit and she's trying to fund her trip to visit her grandma, let's say a few states away, and 10 other kids show up selling it for 10 cents a glass right next door on the same lawn. You think she's going to sell very many glasses at 50 cents? Well, that's what's happening with America bringing in 1 million, mostly low-skill workers, many of them without high school diplomas, every single year. Our immigration system is not based on providing workers for jobs that actually exist in the American economy. Our immigration system, our legal immigration system, is mostly predicated on bringing in somebody's cousin or somebody's sister because it's based on nepotism. It was designed by Ted Kennedy in 1965. I think he wrote it on a bar napkin, and the nice word for it, the euphemism, is family reunification. But, how many people really need to be reunified with their 50-year-old sibling? How many 40-year-olds do we want to allow to bring in their elderly parents who haven't even paid into Social Security who are going to be using Medicare? The legal system is broken, and illegal immigration is out of control. With our southern border, not U.S. sovereign territory, it's effectively the sovereign territory of Mexican drug cartels who smuggle in hundreds of thousands of people. They charge about $5,000 a person. That's actually their biggest business now. Human smuggling has replaced drug smuggling as their biggest business. And 80% of the women and girls who come into the U.S. from Central America are raped on the journey by the coyotes who are smuggling them into the country. 10,000 children are now in U.S. custody. 12,000, 10,000 of them were sent by their parents alone through the desert at the mercy of the cartels.
Because then chain migration can go get them legally, right?
Right, exactly. But I'm saying is by not having a wall, by not securing our southern border, we are making possible humanitarian tragedy. Imagine you had a swimming pool, and you knew that small children might come in from the neighborhood and drown in it, and you didn't put up a fence. And there were kids drowning in your swimming pool every day. Whose fault would that be? That would be partly your fault and partly the parents' fault. So if we as a country don't secure our southern border, we share part of the guilt in this humanitarian tragedy. Plus, of course, it's terrible for us as a country. So it's not morally right. It's not politically smart. It's not responsible. All it does is help employers who want cheap labor and Democrats who want cheap votes and clergymen and bishops who want to fill up their churches, which have emptied because the churches are so liberal nobody goes there anymore.
I couldn't have said all that better myself, and I'm sure you can go on for another 20 minutes on that.
Yes,
but
I'm afraid I can.
I'm happy for it. Now let me I want to ask kind of another clarifying question on this $450 billion a year. You're talking about a segment of the population that is competing for the same employment pay scale dollars, correct?
Yeah, I'm talking about black teenagers, Hispanic citizen teenagers, working class white teenagers, people who get out of prison after misdemeanors who want to reestablish themselves. People like my dad, who was a mailman, and he carried the mail on his back because they didn't even have carts for 37 years. He was built like a brown bear, like a black bear, by the end of his life. He wouldn't be able to support a family of 3 kids the way he did with a stay-at-home wife, because there are 10 people from Honduras willing to work for less.
Yes.
And so as someone from the American working class, I want to stick up for the people back in my neighborhood in Queens, and the people in the Midwest, the people in West Virginia, and the Hispanic teenagers in Tucson, Arizona, and the black teenagers in Los Angeles, all of whom are getting screwed by a policy that benefits Democrat Party politicians and stockholders in big corporations that benefit from cheap labor.
There's another component here, John, and I've watched it happen personally to people that I know, and that is, in order to get promoted, even if you're not necessarily in an hourly labored position, in an entry-level position, but you are in a, let's say, moving your way up the ladder in a company or corporation, oftentimes you won't even get promoted because you're not speaking a second language, especially a Spanish language.
That's true, and even worse. Affirmative action was created for a good reason. It was created to help reverse 100 years of legally enforced segregation after 300 years of slavery, okay? It was designed to help black Americans overcome what had been official legal discrimination imposed by the government. Now, affirmative action applies to every woman and every illegal immigrant who gets amnesty. Do you realize that? If you are an illegal immigrant, you broke our laws, you worked illegally using a stolen Social Security number, you committed identity theft, you get identity, let's say we give you amnesty, you immediately have a leg up on any native-born white American male who might have served in the Iraq War, or a veteran, just because you're a member of a so-called minority group. It is outrageous.
John, you might be my new best friend. Now, I guess the question is, when you were doing the research for the book, and you've got, probably 24 outstanding points in this, were there any particular points or facts or statistics that came across your radar that was completely unexpected, that just kind of made you fall off the chair?
Yeah, well, as a Catholic, I used to think that our bishops wanted virtually open borders out of humanitarian, squishy, sentimental fake ethics, but I thought they had idealistic reasons. I no longer believe that. I've looked at the statistics. 40% of Catholics born in America leave the church. 40%. That's a rate up there with the Episcopal Church or the Presbyterian Church USA, any of those liberal Protestant bodies that are collapsing and turning into real estate holding companies. But the number of Catholics in America has stayed even grown a little. How has that been? Just through a massive influx of people from Latin America, where the bishops do a better job of passing along the faith. So the Catholic bishops of the U.S. are essentially being parasitical on the bishops of Central America in order to keep their churches full so that they don't have their numbers plummeting. So it's not obvious what they're doing, which is letting the liberal priests and gay priests and corrupt officials scandalize the faithful so that they leave. And they're just, instead of trying to fix the seminaries and trying to fix the church that it actually preaches the gospel and evangelizes, what they're doing is they're simply relying on cannon fodder from another country. Of course, those people leave the church too, so you're ending up losing souls for the church, and plus they're making hundreds of millions of dollars as federal contractors.
Yes.
Groups like so-called Catholic charities, it's not a charity and it's not Catholic because it's mostly a federal contractor that uses taxpayer money and is forbidden to do anything religious with it. So it really should just be called federal contractor.
Right.
That's really all it is.
Right.
You know that the Catholic bishops talk about all that we do for refugees. 97 cents of every dollar that the Catholic Church spends on refugees is just federal money that they're passing along while skimming some off the top to keep the lights on. And so as a Catholic, I'm profoundly depressed by that. And I think that many of the problems in the church are being covered over with the Band-Aid of immigration. 1 out of 4 Catholics in America is an immigrant, mostly from Latin America. 1 out of 4.
Well, our agencies, including Health and Human Services, Office of Resettlement, the State Department, they call those agencies VOLAGs, meaning volunteer agencies, but it's become a cottage industry for them in order to be paid by the federal government dollars to, finesse these people into the country, right?
That's right. And that's why you see the bishops down at the border protesting for immigration. I don't see them at abortion clinics. I don't see them at strip joints. I don't see them, at drug rehabilitation centers trying to minister to these people trying to get off the drugs. No, they're lobbying at the border to fill the pews and fill their coffers, and it's a scandal.
Okay. So you, I mean, it's kind of depressing, isn't it? I mean, the
book is actually funny in a lot of places. It's not a depressing book. It's got a lot of humor. We go through the whole history of immigration from the founding fathers and their opinions on immigration, all up through the 1960s and what Ted Kennedy did to the system. We lay out everything that's wrong with it, and we lay out a comprehensive 15-point plan to fix it. So it's not a depressing, tear your hair out book. It's a practical book that offers solutions. It offers quick and dirty arguments. Let's say on social media, people call you a xenophobe. So people say that you're hateful. People say that you're racist. We have the answers to those stupid but sometimes persuasive arguments.
Well, I would argue in one particular item that I can't seem to get any of these experts, and you help me where I'm straying here, that they don't bring up is stabilizing these countries, the Nicaraguas, the Honduras's, the El Salvador's, the Guatemalas, to the point where they don't need to come in here. And nobody is talking about that, are they?
No, in fact, the Mexican elite, you want to talk about the 1%? If you go to Mexico, if you would go to the most exclusive clubs or see the people who are hosts on television, they're blonde hair, blue-eyed. They were all descended from the conquistadors. They have 99.99% of the money, and everybody else divvies up the rest. And it's in order to prevent any kind of social change, in order to prevent reform, they encourage people who are dissatisfied in Mexico, just go to the north, go to America, go to North America. Go to the United States. Mm-hmm. And that keeps their oligarchy in place. And that's why you see the leaders of Mexico are always so desperate to keep that pressure valve to the U.S. open. Because without it, there might be some change in Mexico. There might be some change in Honduras and in Nicaragua and El Salvador. But if you can always just pull up stakes and go to the United States, the most entrepreneurial, the most dissatisfied people, the people who might actually make a change, they just get creamed off the top and move to the United States, and they go work in the kitchen somewhere.
And so what is really happening here, John, is that the United States is really changing its population, but yet these other countries are changing their population too, aren't they?
Well, no, they have a higher birth rate, so they're just sending lots of people up here. We are bringing in a lot of people who are used to crony capitalism and socialism and Marxism, or who are used to having drug cartels run their society. Many of the people coming in are affiliated with drug cartels, and what they do is they prey on their neighbors, and they establish those drug cartels in American cities. And mainly they prey on their fellow immigrants, but, we're next. So just the way Europe is bringing in hundreds of thousands of Muslims who don't believe in religious freedom, who can't stand Jews, who want to beat up gays, who think women should be subjugated, who believe in polygamy, in marital rape, in female genital mutilation. Well, we're bringing in lots of people who are used to a socialist system, a corrupt system dominated by drug cartels. People carry with them the cultural baggage they grew up with. America is being transformed politically into a third world country. And I don't mean because these people are of a different race. I mean because their culture has been terribly affected by corrupt political systems and Marxist ideology. And we are replicating their failed states here. California used to be a Republican stronghold. Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Pete Wilson. A Republican can't get elected dog catcher in California anymore. It's a one-party failed state, and we're going to see one state turn from red to blue after another until you'll never have another pro-life, pro-religious liberty president of the United States again. So we've just barely got Donald Trump. 4 more years of 1 million poor people flooding into the country legally, voting for the Democrats because they see they're going to give them benefits. We are going to lose our country to the radical left, which is already screaming to abolish ICE and effectively stop trying even to remove MS-13 and other cartel members from the country. It's staggering how far left the Democratic Party has gone, and they're doing that. They feel empowered and emboldened to do that because they're counting on replacing the American people with a new people imported from poor countries where people are used to expecting benefits from the government.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with John Smirak, who has written Politically Incorrect Guide to Immigration. John, since your book, how many people have kind of gotten in your face and wanted to, kick you in the shins and step on your toes? Nicely put.
Well, in person, nobody, because I live in Dallas, Texas. I live in Dallas, Texas. I used to live in New York City, where it might have been an issue. I wouldn't want to do a book signing in New York City on this subject. And not because I'm afraid of the immigrants. I'm afraid of the social justice warriors who come from privileged backgrounds, who are mostly white, whose experience of immigration is that the nannies their rich parents hired for them and the people who sell them exotic food from food trucks. The upper middle class isn't hurt by competition from migrant labor. That's the blue collar people, my people, and so that really particularly ticks me off. So I hope your listeners will check out the Politically Incorrect Guide to Immigration, and also check out stream.org, where I write 5 days a week.
Stream.org. All right, John. Here's. If you were to sit in a panel before a congressional hearing, I'm sure that you would like to make 3 distinct points.
Sure. Here are the 3 measures I would do. I would say the 3 most important measures. Build a wall. If you have to, put military bases all along the southern border until we can get Congress to build the damn wall. 2, implement E-Verify. That's the system, the federal system that allows employers to check if the person applying for a job is legal to work here. Most people think that's mandatory. It's not. It's completely optional, which is completely insane. And step 3, get rid of family reunification, chain migration, so that we don't bring people here legally just because they're somebody's cousin or brother or uncle or aunt. But we only let people in for whom jobs exist in America.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably, jobs are one and then entitlements are the other. And those two seem to get lost in always this debate, don't they?
That's right. And that's because the Democrats want more people for their factory voter farms, who will collect government benefits and vote for Democrats. So they have no interest in fixing this.
So when you got these companies, or you got even small business that need to have foreign nationals as cheap labor, what do you replace that cheap labor with, or do you?
You pay Americans more. Imagine that.
Well, I would also say we have some really remarkable work release programs with our prison systems, don't we? And nobody even talks about putting those people into the workplace.
I would rather see the wages go up and let ordinary Americans support their families.
I would too.
Let's do that first.
I agree with you. But I would also say, I mean, I happen to be in Florida, and I've seen the buses that literally bus these people. In fact, I tracked one down going to a gas station about 4:00 in the morning because they literally drive them from farm to farm based on the crop harvest.
Well, that's better. That's better. It's giving them some work habits. And think about this: when those people get out of prison, who's going to be competing with them for jobs? Illegal, recent immigrants, illegal immigrants. We're breaking off the bottom rungs on the ladder to success in America by handing them over to people from foreign countries. And we're saying in America, if you don't have an advanced degree, you're really not worth very much. You're deplorable. We're going to replace you with a foreigner, and you're just going to have to learn to like it.
This whole issue, John, is really fixable within like a 6-month time period, isn't it? If everybody's...
If the Congress would do it, if the Congress would act.
Yeah. I mean, if everybody's kind of going the same direction, it is really, truly a fixable situation, I would say, within 6 months. Now, we keep being told that there are 11 million illegals here. That number's really not the right number, is it?
No, I don't even really know the number, but you know what? Let's solve
matter.
that problem. Let's solve that problem later. First, let's secure the border. First, let's mandate E-Verify. Let's build a wall. Let's reduce the wave of low-skill immigration coming into the country. And then, once all of that is taken care of, and only then, can we do something about maybe giving green cards, not citizenship, to those people, the ones who haven't committed serious crimes like identity theft. But we can't give away amnesty first. If we give away amnesty first, we are just doing a green light to the whole of Latin America. Come on in, the water's fine, you'll get amnesty.
And we don't seem to have some kind of an end. Do we just empty out Honduras altogether? Just say, okay, just shut the country down, and everybody can come here, and we'll put them into Mexico, right?
We'll put them into Florida. We'll put them into...
No!
Yeah.
We have the Haitians.
Anyway, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and good luck with the book, and thanks for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, and more coming your way.
We're about to join Don Newen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an intel analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Newen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Newen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Newen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Check the Talk America Radio schedules for showtimes at talkamericaradio.us.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. For 28 years, I was in the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. No more. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. Radio networks like Talk America Radio will not fail you. Radio shows like Cowboy Logic Radio will not fail you. Check out the entire roster of over 60 weekly radio shows by visiting talkamericaradio.us. That's talkamericaradio.us.
TalkAmericaRadio.us.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Interesting things sometimes do happen on social media, and I was included in a connection here not too long ago with distinct honor, I might add, and that is with Michael Ingmire. And Michael has done some stellar work. I've actually followed some of his work and didn't really, pursue any kind of a connection, but I was so delighted when it happened because we're actually going to talk about something that hasn't been in the headlines for a long, long time, and that is Benghazi. And so Michael has been kind enough to join us here on the Denise Simon Experience because something happened, I guess, gosh, Michael, it's probably 2 months ago now, maybe 3, time does pass, that was a blip in the headlines for a second or two and then just faded away. And sadly so, but you're here with us to kind of pursue this discussion.
Now,
so
are we talking about the Catholic sentence?
Yes.
Okay, now that actually happened on June 27th, so it was a little bit more recent. Like it's really actually sort of less than a month at this point.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
time does fly.
Yeah, time passes, and all that. And yeah, it only was a blip in the screen. And what I had done, because, just for people that don't know me out there, and I'm sure there are many of them, my nephew Sean Smith was killed in the Benghazi attack. And starting in December 2012, I started seeking initially what happened, how it happened, when it happened type of information. Got that information through research and conversations with people. And we've been seeking, since that point, accountability. So on June 27th, I actually about a week before had submitted to Judge Christopher R. Casey, which he uses apparently in his official bio, Cooper, Christopher R. Casey Cooper, U.S. Judge for Federal District Court in District of Columbia. So I had submitted a victim's impact letter because I wanted this guy to receive the maximum sentence. He was the first Benghazi terrorist captured originally during the Obama administration in June of 2014. Shows you how the wheels of justice grind so slowly.
Yes,
because here we are 4 years later. So a victim's impact letter from me indicating full sentence, no concurrent sentences, consecutive sentences. I don't want this guy to see the light of day. Ultimately, despite the entries in the courtroom from Tyrone Wood's widow, Dorothy, and from Tyrone's dad, Charles, and letters from me and other family members, this judge decided to, in essence, give this guy 5.5 years for each count. And the whole thing about it, this guy can, ladies and gentlemen, could be walking the streets of America in like 5 years. He might be getting credit for time served. I had a nice conversation, which I really can't reveal because of just confidentiality promises I gave to the gentleman. But I did talk to Michael DiLorenzo, who was the head prosecutor in this trial. And they had charged this guy with 18 counts originally, including, being a participant to murder. And what they found him guilty of is really kind of laughable in some ways, because it was like destruction of government property. 2 counts of providing material aid to terrorism, and one weapons charge. Now, the weapons charge in and of itself could have given him life in prison, because the actual sentence is 10 years minimum, life maximum, obviously. And this guy gave him 22 years. And that seems to be a kind of unhinged tendency of the Obama-appointed judges. Judge Amy Jackson, judging Amy here, right? The basic thing is, a few months ago, she threw out a wrongful death lawsuit, at least without prejudice, But nonetheless, that had been instituted by Pat Smith and Charles Woods, an Obama-appointed judge. Judge Cooper, an Obama-appointed judge, And it's just like, I really feel at this point, any Benghazi victim and their surviving family members are not going to get any justice in the federal court system under any judge appointed by Barack Obama. I mean, it's biting the hand that fed you. Come on, this guy appointed you. You're going to actually denigrate him in court? No. And that's the problem with the court system, and why we need, with any future terrorist trial, a military tribunal structure. That way, I'm not waiting 4 years for one person to be convicted, tried, convicted, and sentenced, and we can see a little bit more practical justice as far as this application of it. These guys don't need to get parole. They are not American citizens. They are enemy combatants. They are terrorists. And they need to be treated as such.
Michael, in your travels on this and on the Katala case, was it necessarily concocted the way it was to prevent full-blown discovery on all things that were occurring that led up to the night of the Benghazi attack?
Sure, because, and for folks out there, if you really want to know the before, the during, and the aftermath of Benghazi, look up accuracyandmedia.org and look for the Citizens Council Commission. Thank you for correcting me. Citizens Commission on Benghazi. They had a report that came out the day after the House Select Committees, and that is called a Benghazi, a dereliction of duty, which is a very appropriate title to what happened. And I think a lot of times these folks are afraid of blowing the lid up, because, hey, then their concept of the New World Order and how government used to be remains intact.
And I would also add that the question posed to you, that on the concoction of the tight structure of the Katala case, then it prevented other enemy combatants, because I would argue he wasn't one of the main ones, but I could be certainly wrong. That it relieved investigative authorities and whoever else to go back over to Libya or wherever they may be here at this point and track down the rest of them and have them arrested. So it's kind of like you get to just kind of, clap your hands and we're done with the case.
Right. And what a cowardly way to operate, right? Now, but what do I expect out of the American justice system but cowardly operation in regards to Benghazi? The whole thing about it, one thing about this, I mean, I remain humbled because I always am learning new things. I mean, you would think really, literally thousands of hours that I've spent on this subject and, talking, protesting, writing, whatever, that I would, it'd all be old hat. But the thing I found about Katala was actually one of the leaders for an offshoot of Ansar al-Sharia.
Correct.
And I found this out recently in the aftermath of the sentence. And I thought that was interesting because I had portrayed, and I mistakenly on my part, I had portrayed Catala as like a terrorist traffic cop. But he actually was a bit more than that. You know? So I think the problem that I'm having with the sentence is that there is no deterrent here. There's, you know, I mean, you give this guy 22 years, is that going to really, you know, convince other terrorists not to do what they do? I mean, if you give this guy life in prison, or even better, pit him to death, sorry, you know, see no reason to spend my tax dollars or yours on maintaining this piece of, you know what, you know.
Michael, we actually, let me make sure I get this right, because I mean, I'm dusting off some cobwebs here.
Sure.
We actually seized him, and then how did he get back to the United States? Was he one of those that was put on a Navy vessel?
Right, you got it.
Okay,
he was actually he was the first terrorist that was captured because Obama had actually, there was a guy that he droned, for example, whose name escapes me unfortunately at the moment.
Anwar al-Awlaki.
Thank you. That actually was one of the planners of Benghazi. He was operating as a point man for ISIS. And that's the point I've been making for the past couple of years. You know, through research and determination, I'm finding that many of the people that were the planners of Benghazi are now in ISIS. So in essence, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are the father and the mother of ISIS.
And so when Abu Khattab was on the Navy ship, essentially in a brig, and was being interrogated at that point,
and singing like a canary, apparently.
Well, and therein lies where I would say that singing those verses are not available. Correct?
Right. Exactly. That's look for that stuff under Freedom of Information, and it's just
good luck.
There. It's not going to be there, you know. It's just they're not going to tell me or share it with me, you know. But I found it really interesting though, reading the transcript of the trial, because the basic problem with the judge's statements and the defense's statements is that the defense tried to portray him as a poor freedom fighter that had been jailed by Gaddafi, and then, you know, Judge Cooper said, you know, that he was a planner and a leader, yet he gave this guy 22 years. Excuse me. No. Absolutely wrong. A travesty of a sentence. So,
and say what you will about George Bush, but when he labeled these people enemy combatants, that was and he wanted military tribunals in Guantanamo. Right. He was right on all of that. Correct?
Oh, he was absolutely right on that. You know, the problem with George Bush, though, he'd you know, he bowed under pressure. Bush didn't take pressure really well. I'm sorry, you know. And the problem is that, you know, 11 years ago, you know, what do? They released a guy from Guantanamo, and what happens? He basically ends up in Benghazi, you know. And then recently, the same week actually that they were like tying up the Catala case, the Libyan National Army captures this guy. I'm wondering if we're going to get any sort of chance with him.
And that kind of brings us a little bit to today, because I would say we've got an awful lot of Islamic State, former Baathists, you know, whatever they may, you know, all the places that they come from that make up Islamic State, and or all the still existing offshoots of Al-Qaeda. You know, we're killing some, and that's okay, I suppose. But when you kill them, dead man can't speak. So we're not, you know, Trump has done the right thing by keeping Guantanamo open, but to what end? We're not putting anybody there.
Right, exactly, and that's what we need to do. That's, you know, see, that's the thing I'm trying to hear from hopefully the U.S. Attorney's Office is, where are they going to jail Catala? When will he be eligible for parole? And will they entertain the presence of a family member such as myself or any of the other family members at a parole hearing? Because I don't want to see this guy receive the light of day, ever. I hope they send him to Leavenworth, personally. Either Leavenworth or Guantanamo, you know, one or the other. I'd like to see him double-timed. Sorry.
Well, I certainly am a big fan, sadly so, of Guantanamo. I mean,
me too. Yeah.
it serves a lot of purposes. And then, of course, we have that false argument that the Obama administration said that it was a recruiting tool, which is absolutely nonsense.
No.
And still, even to this day, we do not know where the 4 former Taliban commanders are, that we released, for Bo Bergdahl.
That we traded for a little weaselly,
Yeah, and so
American traitor and deserter, yeah.
There's these wounds are still open, right, Michael? And I don't see anybody in the journalistic world or the reporting world, other than the little guys like you and me, that are paying any kind of attention to this, correct?
Right. I mean, Fox, when this stuff really happened and they started like pushing towards a select committee and all that, I mean, I appeared on Fox countless times, right? Talking about this. Used to make Bill Hemmer's head spin around on its axis, And the basic thing is that now people just say, well, it's like an old story. We can cover it. And I'm going like, come on. The problem is that there's still not any real accountability. I mean, dereliction of duty is really another form of treason. And treason is just like murder. There's no statute of limitations.
So what I want you to tell the listening audience what you have done, that you've got something up on the WhiteHouse.gov website. Right.
Okay. There's a twofold process here. One, I wrote an article. I've been writing for Politichicks.com since September of 2015. Ann Murrell is Mother Courage as far as an editor. Okay. I mean, I've never had a story idea turned down whatsoever. And I've written politically, musically, and socially. When I saw the Catala sentence, I was so angry that it was almost hallucinatory. It was like, please. So I decided a couple days ago, after thinking about it for the past week, that I was going to create a petition and try to keep it short in its brevity. In the sense that we, the undersigned, feel that the 22-year Catala sentence is a travesty, and therefore we would like to see all future terrorist trials tried in a military tribunal structure. So people can look at that both on my Facebook page, and they can also get it, if they don't want to deal with like little social media cutesy, go to petition.whitehouse.gov, okay? And the petition's up there, military tribunal trials for terrorists. It's a real simple statement, a real simple title. And then you just feel moved to sign it. We want to get 100,000 signatures. We want the White House to pay attention.
And Michael, here's what's kind of fascinating is media, whoever it may be, they do watch those petitions, and certainly those that are on change.org go up. And they often report on them, but here lately, there has been nothing reported on what, we little people out here in the world are still crying for. There's so many open issues left over from the Obama administration that have been cast aside that I would say this Trump administration really needs to have a Citizens Commission again.
Well, I think we need a special
deal with
prosecutor.
Some of these.
We need a special prosecutor. We need an un-Ken Starr-like prosecutor, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that actually will do the job, because Congress can't do it. I was watching the recent FBI hearings and stuff, and what a patent leather joke. These guys are like, how patent leather shoes are really shiny and all that sort of thing. Well, the whole thing about it is that these guys are trying to shine, and they have these commissions, these committees rather, and they pontificate and they go through their little campaign backbiting, and people like talk over each other and argue with each other. It's really actually sort of an embarrassment. And nothing gets done. We've had like 4 or 5 different commissions, and with the exception of the Citizens Commission on Benghazi, no truth has really been told. Nobody's been held accountable. Trey Gowdy is a coward as far as the way he handled the Benghazi committee. He told us that he was going to handle the before, the during, and the after. Well, he handled the during, and he touched on the after, but he never dealt with the before. And the before is a crucial element to understanding Benghazi.
And you bring up an amazing point, because, the Oversight Committee in theory is supposed to be a great thing. Well, there's oversight, but there's never consequence.
Yeah. Right.
And it's
I call them the underside committee, actually, because they really, they don't have blinders.
They don't have certain authorities and certain powers.
Right.
For you have seen some wrongs here, and they just necessarily, okay, we've got this and this and this. So then they redo a criminal referral over to the Justice Department, and therein lies where things go to die.
Yeah, exactly. Because the Justice Department, and sorry, folks, Jeff Sessions isn't hitting it for me either at this point. But the Obama Justice Department was like criminal.
Oh yes,
and the current Justice Department is potentially incompetent. Now they are doing some other things that I've heard about that are good, as far as protecting people's rights and the rights of children, and I applaud that. But in terms of Fast and Furious, in terms of Benghazi, in terms of Extortion 17, and all that stuff, IRS, things that are really actual crimes perpetrated by the previous administration, they're missing in action. They're MIA.
All right, back to the sentencing and back to Pat Smith and Charles Woods and
great folks, by the way.
I have been. You were taking me back, but I've never talked to Pat Smith, but I've talked to Charles Woods and so forth. And I know Dennis Haney, and I know Claire Lopez, and
we have some mutual friends, definitely.
Yeah, lots of them. Yeah. But what was their ultimate take? They were like, okay, this is the best that's going to happen, and we just have to move on because otherwise.
No. Charles is, there's actually a really good the day after this, the day of the sentence, I think. Charles was in Washington, and he went on Bill Hemmer, and he basically let him have it. So none of these folks. Pat, God bless her. I talk to Pat weekly at least, and Pat is sort of she's getting older. She doesn't feel as well as she used to, and I'm sort of taking over a little bit of the weight because I'm a bit younger and a little bit more honorary. These folks don't take it. They've been standing up, but they've been standing up for a long time. So all of us have.
They're worn down.
I have the dubious privilege of being the first family member to speak out. But I'm a family member only by marriage. John Smith was my nephew by marriage. Okay, married my wife's niece. But hey, I'm from the South. Blood is blood.
Have you, Michael, ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Michael Ingmire, who you can find his work over at Politics. Michael, have you got some FOIA requests in the pipeline?
No, I started to do it, but I realized somebody basically, and that was in regards to the Katala interrogation, and somebody told me I was absolutely wasting my time and not to fill out the reams of paperwork to even do it, And this is somebody I won't reveal who they are, but they just, I respect them. They're in the intelligence community, and I take their advice seriously. So no, at this point, I think FOIA is ridiculous. I'm very good friends with Tom, with Janice Rudup, who's Tom Fitton's assistant, and Tom and I were actually on the first Benghazi Memorial Committee back in the summer of 2013, and those folks are real heroes. They really are. They just fight tooth and nail for the information. From August 11th of last year through September 11th of last year, I contacted the White House daily, by phone, by email, by fax, and basically asked for the president to consider releasing all documents related to Benghazi. Okay, there's hundreds, right? Possibly even low thousands of documents out there, right? And Judicial Watch got like 22. What an insult.
Well, it's clearly a festering problem, and what I mean is, government accountability. And even if you are a congressman and or a senator with a title and some kind of recognition, they still are not getting any responsive activity either.
Right.
And so what you're really describing here, Michael, is that we have a continuing systemic brokenness, even with all of these checks and balances in place.
Right.
We're not advancing this train here at all, are we?
Exactly, because what we're dealing with is constitutional malpractice. I mean, I always thought it was really patently ridiculous that Mike Rogers handled, for example, the House Intelligence Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole thing about it was like, first of all, his wife was like, actually part of an agency that was providing security to Benghazi. So, a little conflict of interest there.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys, they don't do the jobs. I've talked to probably 500 senatorial and congressional offices. And I've only had about 5 guys that I really thought were decent people. Retired Congressman Frank Wolf, Louis Gohmert,
Mm-hmm.
Duncan Hunter out of California, Jim Jordan, some people that really cared and actually had some integrity about themselves.
Yeah.
Most of these people are weasels. Some of the things that some of these offices have said to me, I'm glad I'm a gentleman. Let's just say that.
I clearly understand that one.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you stay the course, and I hope that with this radio segment that we get some traction here on some signatures on the petition for sure.
Yeah, please do.
And I'm with you. Until things have a true consequence, and what I would call necessarily an equal consequence,
right,
then these wounds stay open. And because of that condition, the next time and the next time and the next time will look like the last time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because there's really, to me, one of my great concerns is that we're going to have more Benghazis because these people don't seem to take security seriously. I mean, my God, Hillary Clinton got 600 requests from Ambassador Chris Stevens, her supposed friend, for additional security. And not only did she not increase the security, she reduced it, leading up to September 11th, 2012. And she needs to answer for that.
Michael Ingmire, thanks so much for being with us and keeping this alive. You're welcome back anytime as a follow-up, because
sure.
I'm with you on this one. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you with us, and we'll see you again very, very soon.